If you're trying to become a real life superhero, the things you do and the things you put in your body matter because you're trying to maintain this beautiful weapon to fight evil, do good, protect others, however it is that you do that. Maybe you're just fighting the darkness of self-doubt and depression that's trying to keep you from doing the things and the good that you want to do in your life. So, how do we boost that energy? The first article that I've got for you today is this lovely, really well-cited Helpline article. And Helpline does a very good job of rating and citing their sources. So they get their things from the National Institutes of Health, and you can see and track what's going on. And they say the first thing you need to know is that all foods give you energy in the form of calories. I think everyone should know that, right? But not all foods affect your energy the same way. So when you eat, the first thing that gets digested earliest is carbohydrates, and then proteins, and then fats, and it goes in that order in your digestive system. So carbohydrates usually give you your energy boost first and quickest, and that's why we as mammals love and crave things that tend to be high carbohydrate, because we want those quick boosts. If you need to chase down a predator or something like that, because we are the ultimate predators, we are human beings, dun dun dun. If you need to chase down a predator, you'll need these like rapid boosts of energy. But you'll also need this long-term protein building up those muscles and those fats for storage for those, big bad times when you don't have enough food. So we tend to crave carbohydrates. This isn't all a bad thing though, because the foods that are going to give you the quickest energy boost by getting that glucosey, sugary stuff right up into your blood are going to be the carbohydrates. But you don't have to get carbohydrates that increase your glycemic index all the time. So your glycemic index basically is how the glucose gets into your blood and how quickly it's metabolized. The problem with a rise that's too quick or too aggressive is that it then leads to a crash, because all your cells like slurp up all the glucose then, and then you feel fatigued. A natural analog to this is right after, if you've ever been in a huge trauma situation where like a car accident, or after an assault, or high adrenaline military situation, sometimes right after the adrenaline surge for that first situation, and after it's over, you'll feel real sore and tired the next day, even if you didn't do as much physical exertion as you would with your normal exercise. And that's because what adrenaline does is it causes your body to release glucose very quickly so that your cells can pull it up really quickly, especially your muscles, and you can take action immediately. That's how an adrenaline surge works. Well, after that, your muscles have usually done more work than they're used to. You tend to have, so that can, you can have micro tearing and other things like that, so that can be part of the soreness. But a big part of the fatigue is that now you're crashed. Now you've, used up that glucose really quickly. So that's a natural analog to the sugar highs and sugar crashes that we might, feel sometimes. So if you can get carbohydrates that cause a steady and continuous rise, and they don't have a high glycemic index, they don't shoot you really quickly, that's really ideal. One thing I like about this article is it explains how caffeine works. Caffeine doesn't work by literally improving your energy stores the way food might or sugar might. Caffeine works by targeting your nervous system and blocks the things that make you feel, sleepy. It affects the part of your nervous system that literally is going to stimulate your heart, right? Because you block adenosine. But I wanted to give you a couple high energy foods that you can use immediately. You can immediately today, after work, pick it up at the store, these foods. The first one is, I found this phenomenal and really interesting study on blueberries and fatigue in mice. It was in the Open Journal of Biomedical Engineering in 2015. And the research article was called Research on the Anti-Fatigue Effect and Movement Ability of Blueberry Polysaccharides on Aged Mice by Dr. Bobai and some other folks. They divided mice randomly into a normal control group, an aged model group, a low-dose blueberry polysaccharide group, a middle-dose blueberry polysaccharide group, and a high-dose blueberry polysaccharide group. After they gave the blueberry polysaccharide for 20 days, they tested how long it took mice to get tired during swimming and with their and then fatigue indexes. It's not a very nice experiment. A lot of the fatigue experiments they do on mice, I think, border on animal cruelty. So I do want to say that I appreciate I think we always need to be recognizing and appreciative of the sacrifice that animals make in order that our health can improve. And I think we also always need to be cognizant of ways we can come up with more humane models. And I think my issue with this study is this is a study that can be done on humans, like the other study that I'm going to mention in a couple minutes. Like this kind of study you could test on people. It's not so dangerous that you need to test it on mice and, you know, make them get tired and scared until they almost drown. That's really not necessary. There's other designs you could use to determine the same thing. So they did find out that the blueberry polysaccharides at this time extended the exhaustive swimming time. So mice were able to swim longer without getting exhausted, and decreased their BUN, which is one of the toxins in your body that your body releases that your kidneys have to filter out, and increased a lot of antioxidants like SOD and so forth. SOD dismutase. So they improved antioxidation. So blueberry polysaccharides in that experiment had a good anti-fatigue effect. There was another study. This one is in the Journal of Medical Food, and this was in 2020, and they did the ethanolic extract of Vaccinium corymbosum alleviates muscle fatigue in mice. What is Vaccinium corymbosum? It's a high bush blueberry, which is the kind of blueberry that you most commonly, see. This study also helped evaluate on mice blueberry extract, except this time instead of a particular polysaccharide formulation, this formulation was an ethanol extract. So in this case, they divided the mice into 3 groups: a non-exercise control group, an exercise control group, and exercise and supplementation group. So compared with the exercise control group, the supplementation group showed increased endurance exercise capacity on day 21. And the accumulation of lactate was inhibited, the consumption of fatty acids was enhanced, indicating the delay of muscle fatigue. In addition, VCE is what they're calling it for short. I don't know why they just don't call it, like, I guess blueberry-all doesn't sound good. So, if you're fatigued today, consider blueberries, as long as you don't have some kind of allergy to it. And you can get blueberries, even if you can't afford to get them in season, you can try to get, like, extracts, powders, things like that. Juices. If you can't afford to just eat a ton of blueberries, treat blueberries like they're your medicine, like every day. Like how much would you pay for, a good medicine that makes a difference long term for your energy? Instead of buying an energy drink, buy a, little bit of blueberry juice. In addition, they found that VCE supplementation elevated mRNA expression levels of mitochondria biogenesis-associated genes, such as peroxisome proliferator activated receptor 1Y coactivator 1 alpha, and not 1Y, it's actually like 1 gamma or something, nuclear respiratory factor, and mitochondrial transcription factor A, and fatty acid beta oxidation associated genes such as carnitine, palmitoyl transferase 1, and a bunch of other ones. What does that mean? That means they enhance mitochondrial biogenesis and therefore they also enhance fatty acid oxidation. What does that mean? Two things. In your cells, these chains of fatty acids that your body can then break down and use for energy, right? If you enhance that breakdown, basically you have a faster and better breakdown of that, you will have more energy. The other thing, the mitochondrial biogenesis, mitochondria are the things that turn the energy that you receive from food into ATP that your cells can use. Your mitochondria basically create ATP. They create the energy. You're both better at breaking down the stores and oxidizing these fatty acids, and you're also better at making, biogenesis, generating new ATP with blueberries. The caffeine question is a good question because really the answer to it is don't skip breakfast, because the thing that's actually giving you the energy stores that you're going to be able to continue using is, the food that gives you the sugars that you need, right? Or instead of sugars, you can get the nice complex carbohydrates and then your proteins and fats that you need to actually build up the rest of your body, right? If you think about it, proteins are the things that you are made of. So if you don't eat protein, you run out of you, okay? Fats, like I mentioned, are for your, emergency states, your starvation state. They're the things that you need to continually be using, right? And then your carbohydrates are your short-term energy stores. You need a little bit of all of it, which is why vegetables are so important, right? Vegetables are technically a kind of carbohydrate. They're just not what we call carbs nutritionally. When we say I'm avoiding carbs, what we mean is I'm not eating, pasta and bread. I'm not getting those simple carbs. I'm getting those things that are going to give me this longer-term metabolism support. And your green leafy vegetables, your colorful vegetables, your vegetables along the gamut of the rainbow, right? All of those also have really important coenzymes that help other functions in your body. Like I said, you're made of proteins. Well, a lot of what your body does is based on enzymes. And those enzymes, which are made of proteins and also help to make proteins and also help turn proteins into other proteins to build your muscle, to build your skin, to build your heart, to build all the things that make you after you wear out over time. Your immune system, everything in you is proteins. Well, those enzymes that do all that work need coenzymes to help them out. So when you fail to give your body colorful vegetables, you are crippling your body's ability to regenerate itself and build itself. Failing to eat vegetables is not just, oh, I don't like it. It's actually causing yourself to break down faster because you're not helping your body to function. I saw Alex Hormozi, who's a bodybuilder and a business guru, do this video about how he looks so good and he can still eat pizza and all these other things. And he makes this excellent point that to look beautiful and cut and whatever, you really just need to be having less calories in than you're outputting, essentially. But the problem with his way of thinking is this is not going to improve longevity. You might have good genes and so you might be lucky, but in general, the human being needs to not die of heart disease, to not die of diabetes, to not die of high blood pressure. All of these things, as your body is wearing down, it doesn't really matter if you look beautiful if you're not getting the good stuff. So this is why when I try to encourage you towards weight loss and towards eating healthy, I'm not really encouraging the beauty thing so much. I'm encouraging function. I want you to be a hero, somebody who can go out and do things that make a difference for other people. I want your career choices. I want everything you think about to be towards an actual purpose, so that even when mental illness is coming for you, even when the people around you are coming for you, even when you're miserable, you can continue because you have a purpose and you have that strong mental purpose and your body is fit towards that purpose. I'm serious when I say I want to help create real life superheroes. I'm not kidding. Like, I mean it. And so the closest you can get to developing regenerative powers like Wolverine or super strength like Superman is to give yourself the coenzymes that are going to give you that regeneration, that are going to build up your musculature. And so that's why, you know, vegetables matter. So when we're talking about energy and we're talking about caffeine versus other energy, caffeine is this useful phytochemical, right? It's a chemical that originally comes from plants that you can use to stimulate your brain, right? But as far as the rest of your body and getting that energy to combat long-term fatigue, you're gonna want to get your good coenzymes in there, and you're gonna want to get good carbohydrates, and it's gonna depend. This is another thing, is I don't think a diet plan for anybody is one size fits all. That's why this isn't official medical advice, because unless you and I, and there's nobody in the chat right now that I have an individualized relationship with, unless you have contacted me to do health coaching or something, you know, we haven't helped to start figuring out what is your individualized situation. And even then, unless you're my patient, we haven't, you know, sat down and had an examination and so forth. So you have to individualize, but the benefit of this kind of information that I'm offering is, even if you don't have access to that kind of individualized care, I'm giving you information so you can kind of figure it out. And we're going to get to that at the end of this little lecture, because we're going to talk about firefighters and this really interesting study on firefighters that I really think helps us to think about and figure out what ratios of what foods you really need, because how often you eat, what you eat, both of those things, they're going to depend heavily on the kind of work that you're needing to do, which is similar to the conversation we had about energy. So the next randomized controlled trial I wanted to talk to you about is a human trial, and this was in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. This was in 2021. And this study was titled "Blueberry Supplementation Reduces the Blood Lactate Response to Running in Normal Baric Hypoxia, but has no effect on performance in recreational runners." And I thought this study was really important to include, because you tend to see studies reported in the news that only have positive results, right? They only say something new and exciting. When I was working as a ghost blogger for Science Direct and Scripted and a bunch of other companies way back like 10 years ago, one of the projects that I was assigned to was this project where they were discussing the problem with current scientific, you know, like pop sci news, in that grad students, because of the way the media works and because of the sensationalism of academic, of the academic graduate system, grad students are being encouraged to always do, you know, new and exciting research, and there's not enough emphasis on research that replicates or duplicates other research, right? So if a paper comes out and says blueberries do this, ideally, according to the scientific method, the true scientific method, that information needs to be replicable. We need to be able to repeat it and get the same results, right? That shows that it's more likely to be true. But this grad student is more likely to pick a new research topic than to replicate a previous experiment, because that's gonna be better for his research grants, or look better in front of her professors or whatever. And that person is more likely to get featured in the media and for like pop sci to like talk about them, or National Geographic or whatever, if they're doing something new and exciting. And unfortunately that cheapens the scientific process. So people a lot of times only want to talk about, in a lot of fields, research that says this does this good thing and not this does nothing. And I think it's important to talk about research that says this does not do this thing. So that is why I pulled this up. So blueberries are concentrated with anthocyanins possessing antioxidant properties, they say, And as these properties usually counter fatigue, they're wondering if blueberry supplementation in runners improves performance and recovery, particularly in hypoxic runners. And what they found is there was no difference in heart rate, oxygen saturation, or trial time, at least not statistically significantly, in the distance run. So runner performance did not improve with blueberries. And that's important. It's important to report on the null hypothesis, right? Eating blueberries is not going to suddenly make you faster than the person next to you. Whereas, like we talked about in the other video, in some cases, depending on your athletic field, an energy drink might do that in the short term for performance, right? And again, we talked about most people shouldn't have energy drinks. It can kill you. If you're a kid, you certainly shouldn't. They can give you insomnia, blah, blah, blah. And somebody brought up the good point in the polls, like, don't forget pregnant women and so forth shouldn't have it. Of course, that's on the label, but blah, blah, blah. So things that have a stronger effect usually also have stronger side effects, right? So taking a handful of blueberries before a run is not going to suddenly make you faster than the other guy. I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that. I think it's important to mention this. However, what this study found that was interesting, oh, and another note is they only did the blueberry supplementation for 4 days versus the mice experiments, both were 20 days or more. But in these humans, specifically these runners, supplementation lowered the blood lactate response to running. And they're saying the significance of this finding is uncertain given the absence of an ergogenic effect. But one thing that we do know, right, about lactate is that's the stuff in your muscles that makes you feel kind of fatigued and sore. So the real interesting experiment from the information that we get on this study would be to see the result not in time trial, but in fatigue and endurance, like was done with the mice that were forced to continue exercising until they, collapsed and started to drown, which is, like I said earlier, not nice. So, also the number of humans is less than the number of mice, to my understanding. It's 11 experienced runners doing a 30-minute time trial. So blueberries don't seem to be a performance item. They seem to be an item that is going to help with fatigue. This is why somebody like me takes it and tries to take them to improve things like chronic fatigue, right? Because somebody like me, with all the different chemicals that are going wrong in my body that tell my body to be tired when they shouldn't, some of which have to do with that adrenaline response that we talked about earlier. Almost 100% of males who have fibromyalgia, like I have had combat experience, and an enormously high amount of females have had like a sexual assault trauma. So it's fascinating because you're talking about groups of people who've had chronically elevated cortisol, plus they've had very elevated adrenaline spikes at different points in time. And that is going to dramatically alter your metabolism of food and your glucose and other things like that. And it's also interesting because people with fibromyalgia, we talked also about immune system gut function in a previous video. People with fibromyalgia have an altered amount of bacteria. The bacteria in my gut are different than the bacteria in a normal person's gut. Well, we haven't tested mine in particular, but theoretically they are. So it's interesting because you've altered, because food changes a lot of things, but also how your body responds to food matters. So now we're talking about chronically elevated cortisol levels, changes in how your adrenaline is working. Now we're talking about what is your body doing with its sugars? How is your body moving energy around, right? And so that we kind of start to scratch the surface of things like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia when we talk about foods and things like this. And what happens with your excess, sugars, or how your body handles sugars, how your immune system works also affects, what's going on with your bacteria in your gut. And of course that affects your immune system, and so it becomes this whole thing, right? It seems like the blueberries are more relevant to somebody like me, right? Or to, endurance and things over time. So there was another study that had a similar effect, almost the same thing. This was a randomized controlled trial in 2019 in the International Journal of Sports Nutrition Exercise Metabolism, and they found that 4 days of blueberry powder supplementation lowers blood lactate response to running, but has no effect on time trial performance. Same thing. So another person that likely blueberries would be good for, and we're going to talk about this either next week or in the special workshop I'm preparing for you guys, is somebody who's got something going on cognitively or mood-wise, depressively, but we'll talk about those studies later. But we can kind of see hints of it now when we're talking about things like endurance, things like continued survival, rather than energy boost type things like running, right? So that's blueberries. Another way you can get these like good sustained carbohydrate boosts, right? Because fruits, we talked about, you know, the simple carbohydrates that are going to give you a short boost. And the benefit to a carbohydrate like blueberries is that in addition to having that little short sugar boost that is, you know, common to fruit, they've got other properties, polysaccharides and things like that, that are, you know, good for you in other ways, like blueberries, right? This is why it's better if you can have a fruit than a piece of candy to boost your energy, right? I think that makes sense, because candy doesn't have these chemicals in it that this plant, you know, has been created and evolved with. This plant has things, because fruits, think about this, fruits want to be eaten. Unlike animals, which try to run away and not be eaten, fruits exist and have co-evolved with prey animals. And, you know, one can argue that this is the design plan for them from the very beginning, that you eat fruits, prey eats fruits, and then those seeds and things get to travel further. They get fertilized in all the other things that you eat, and then those seeds can grow. So fruits, you know, become a plant's way to further reproduction. So they want you to eat them. That is why they have beautiful colors and smells. They're being like, come here, come eat me so I can make more babies, right? So they were naturally designed to be something that animals who eat more of this fruit will live longer, because I want to encourage more animals to eat my fruit. So I want to support a population of animals that eat my fruit, right? Basically, it just happens very naturally. Remember, evolution doesn't happen like in Pokemon from like, oh, this turns into this. It's not like that. It's over a population. So it's a subtractive event. It's not additive. It's not like, you know, the black pepper moths didn't suddenly turn white. What happened was you had black and white pepper moths, and depending on the environmental conditions, you know, whichever color dies out based on what tree colors are available to hide them from the birds that are trying to eat them, right? Same thing. It's a subtractive event. Prey animals that die of bad health die, right? And if prey animals that eat blueberries live longer, well, then you're going to only have prey animals around that want to eat blueberries, right? So it becomes just very natural within the population for both the coevolution of the plant and the animal to have a blueberry be healthy for you. It just happens naturally, because the blueberries that have healthy things end up surviving more because they're able to drop more babies, because the surviving animals can take their seeds and spread them further. Does that make sense? That's like a quick primer on population evolution and coevolution. So fruits have naturally got these benefits for you, and specifically natural fruits, not really man-bred fruits like apples, tend to be very nutritionally deficient compared to fruits like blueberries, which have co-evolved with birds and a lot of other creatures naturally. Berries in general tend to have lots and lots and lots and lots of good things in them for you. So versus apples. Most apple varieties have been cultivated and altered by people, and so they didn't just naturally have all these things that are good for you in them. So, and it's kind of that way with a lot of fruits. So, you know, berries, get berries in you because they have that carb sugar boost, but they also have these other things in them that are good for you, some of which, like the blueberry polysaccharides, are energy boosting. I hope that made sense. I hope that wasn't too complex or confusing way to put it. So that's one group of foods to start including, is things like berries, especially dark colored berries. In nature, something that's dark colored usually means that it has more high energy or high power chemicals in it. We can go into great depth on that at another time, but certain molecules within the how to put this? Certain molecules, when they are hit by light, release certain photons on the energy spectrum, and things that have more complex high energy bonds within the molecule will tend to release more of darker color photons. There's a lot of detail that can here's a way to put it that everyone will understand. Chlorophyll. Right? Chlorophyll is how plants collect energy from the sun and turn it into something that they can store. Right? We all learn that in biology. Chlorophyll is the little stacked molecule that gives plants their green color. So a plant that has a lot of chlorophyll will be darker green, right? And conversely, a plant that has a lot of chlorophyll will also be getting more energy from the sun. Therefore, you can logically understand that a darker green plant, which is getting more energy from the sun, is storing more energy, has more energy for you to eat. I hope that makes sense. And there's many other plant analogs that are like chlorophyll that are different molecules, that are reds, blues, purples, and things like that. So I believe tomatoes are red because of the lycopenes, which have their anti-cancer effect, but that's a different conversation entirely. So wines, dark red wines also. That's why dark red wine is healthier for you than a white wine, because it's got those high energy molecules in it, right? So logically, what you want to be eating is colorful foods, not potatoes and starches and corns and, white bread. You want to eat things that are dark and colorful, okay? So that should right away help you think when you go into the supermarket and you're looking for, hey, I want something so that throughout my week I'm going to have more energy. It's like I'm looking for dark rainbow plants. That's right away going to make your life a little bit easier. So, fruits. I think I've said enough about fruits. And when they are not good.